In this lesson, we're going to learn how to find the midpoint of a segment. So the first thing is understanding what a midpoint is. So the midpoint is the point in the middle of a segment. So it just makes perfect sense. Midpoint, middle point. So a point in the middle of a segment. So if it's in the middle, so if I have a segment here, and if this is the midpoint, that means that these two parts here have to be congruent. It divides a segment into two congruent parts. So that's also something we can add. So a midpoint divides a segment into two congruent segments. So with that idea, let's look at this first example. So it says F is the midpoint of EG. So go ahead and draw the segment EG. So here's E, here's G, and F is in the middle. F is the midpoint. So that means these two parts are congruent. And then it says EG is 5x plus 4. So that means this entire thing is 5x plus 4. And EF is 2x plus 37, so 2x plus 37. So it says to find x and then the length of FG. So if you think about this, anytime we have to find x, the first thing you have to do is you have to come up with an equation that relates these expressions so that you can solve for x. So the relationship here is that this piece right here is half of the entire thing, or two of these will make up the whole thing. So up to you, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So one way is to say two of these, so 2 times 2x plus 37 equals 5x plus 4, so equals the whole thing. So that's one option. The other option is to say that 2x plus 37 equals 1/2 of 5x plus 4. I just don't want to do it that way because then I'm dealing with a fraction, so I'm skipping that part. Or the third option, you can say 2x plus 37 plus 2x plus 37 equals 5x plus 4, because this over here is really 2x plus 37 as well. So either way, you will get the same answer. So we go ahead, we distribute this. So we have 4x plus 74 equals 5x plus 4. Subtract the 4x from both sides, and then subtract the 4. So those are gone, so we have 70 equals x, because those are gone. So there's the first part, finding x. The second part is to find the length of FG. So to find the length of FG, you go back to your picture, and remember we said that these two parts are equal, so FG is the same thing as 2x plus 37. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the 70. So I have 2 times 70 plus 37. So you simplify that and you end up with 177. So there's the second part. The next example here, start by drawing your picture. So we have M is the midpoint of AB. So we have a segment AB with M in the middle, so the midpoint, the middle point, so the two congruent parts. It says that AM, so this is M, AM is 1/2 y minus 3. And then BM is 8 minus 1/2 y. We want to find y and then the length of AB. So for this one, figure out the relationship between these two. This time we're dealing with the two parts. So the two parts, if you have a midpoint, the two parts will always be congruent to each other. So if they're congruent, we set them equal. So the first thing we're going to do is set them equal. So 1/2 y minus 3 equals 8 minus 1/2 y. So there's two options to solving this. You can clear out the denominators by multiplying everything by 2. So clear out those fractions, multiply everything by 2. In this case, if I don't do that, I looked ahead, and if I just add the 1/2 to both sides, it's going to end up making it a whole number. So I'm not going to worry about canceling out the fractions, because as soon as I add the 1/2, and I'm adding it to a 1/2, I'm going to end up with a 1. So that's my second option, is just to leave the fractions and do the math with it. So in this case, it's easy enough because we have 1/2 and 1/2, which equal a whole. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring the 3 over as well. So those cancel, those 3's cancel. So 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1, so I end up with 1y. And then 8 plus 3 gives me 11. So the first part is y equals 11. The second part is going to be to plug in. You want to find the length of AB. So really, I want to find the length of the entire thing. So if we find the length of one of these parts, it's going to be the same for both since they're equal. And then we just add them together. So if I plug in, so I'm just going to plug in right here. So I have 1/2 11 minus 3. And when I do that, I get 5/2. And it's a good check to actually plug into this, even though you know it's going to be the same, but it's a good check to plug in, because if it's not the same, then you know you did something wrong. So I plug in and I get 5/2. So that means the length of AB is going to be to add those two together. So 5/2 plus 5/2 is going to give me 5. So there's my length. So that's midpoint algebraically, dealing with algebraic expressions. The next thing is you have to be able to find midpoint on a coordinate plane. So the easiest thing to do is just to count the distance between the endpoints and divide that distance by 2, and that's how you're going to find the midpoint. So again, one way to do this is the graphical way. So I'm just going to say count and take half of distance. And that isn't the best description, but it's just kind of the shortened version, and I'll explain that more in a minute. And then the other way, the algebraic way, is to use the formula. So algebraically, there's a midpoint formula. So midpoint is a point, so that means in the end it's going to be a coordinate. It's going to be an x comma y. So it's going to be the average of your x values, because you're finding the middle. So if you want to find the middle, you take the average. So you add up the two x's, divide by 2, and then comma, add up the two y values and divide by 2. So notice that my answer has parentheses and a comma between them, because it's going to be a coordinate. It's going to be an x comma a y, because midpoint, it is a point, so it's a coordinate. So there's your formula. So we're going to do we're going to do this problem both ways, each of the methods, just so that you can see both. So start by graphing. So I graph these 2 points. So I have 4, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, up 2. And then I have -2 up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to go ahead and connect these. So here's my segment. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to count from B to A. So I'm trying to fix this so it looks a little bit nicer. So from here, let's go ahead and start by counting. So from B to A, so I'm going to count either direction, over and then down, or down and over. It doesn't really matter. So if I start from B, I have to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So down 4, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the distance that you count, because remember, you can't count diagonally on a graph. So I count horizontal and vertical, and then from there, I have to cut that in half. So instead of going down 4 and over 6, well, you're trying to find the middle, so go down 2, so 1, 2, then over 1, 2, 3. So here's my midpoint. So my midpoint is going to be 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the graphing way. Algebraically, you just use the formula. So we plug in. So you add your x's together. So it's going to be -2 plus 4. The order that you add does not matter. And then add the y's together. So 6 plus 2 over 2. So then combine like terms first, or combine the top here. So we have -2 plus 4, so it gives me 2 over 2. 6 plus 2 is 8 over 2. And then you just reduce. Notice the entire time I keep my parentheses and I keep my comma. I only reduce this side and I reduce this side. I never combine the two because it's two separate things. This is your x value. This is your y value. You're taking the average of the two x's. You're finding the middle of it. And you're finding the average of the y's. You're finding the middle of it. So there you go. You get the same answer. So that's using the formula to find the middle. The other scenario is what happens when they give you the midpoint and they give you one of the endpoints and they want you to find the next endpoint. So for this one, I'm going to start by graphing. So I have 6, 2. So 6, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up 2. So that's going to be A. And then 2, 0 is my M. So I'm going to get rid of this over 6 here because it's kind of in the way. So here is my segment where M is the middle. I'm trying to find B. Where does B go? Where does the other endpoint go? So we know it's going to be somewhere over here because we have to make it so that this distance is the same as this distance right here in order for M to be the midpoint. So all we have to do is we just have to count. So from A to M, it's down 1, 2, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4. So down 2 and then over 4. Just repeat that because you need that to be the exact same thing on both sides of n. So down 2, then over 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's B to make M in the middle. So that distance is the same. So on my graph here, I have -2, -2. So there's B. Algebraically, you could use the formula, but that's, I think, more difficult. So what I think is a little bit easier is if basically we just separate these points and we line them up. So I say 6, 2. I'm going to put M in the middle. And then I'm going to put B down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out, well, how did we get from A to M? So basically on the graph, I went down 2 over 4. If we're not using a graph, well, that means you have to just figure out mathematically, how did I get from 6 to 2? What did you add or subtract? So I had to subtract 4. So that just means that I have to repeat that. Notice on the graph, if you subtract 4 from x, it really means on the graph you're moving left 4. So it's your horizontal movement. So I subtract 4 again, and I get -2. You do the exact same thing on the other side here. So what did I have to do to go from 2 to 0? So this is the vertical movement. I had to subtract 2, which meant I went down 2. So I went vertical was down 2, horizontal was left 4. That's why it's subtracting 4 from the x and subtracting 2 from the y. So you have to keep that distance the same if M is in the middle. So I keep that distance the same, subtract 2 again, and I get -2. So either way, you get the same answer. So those are your two scenarios that you would do with midpoint on a graph or using coordinates. So at this point, now you can do the check your understanding problems.